I think there are indications that it's moving to that direction. Actually, one of the things and Rob and I have not debriefed on this, so you may hear different opinions. I actually was struck by the Stockholm Criminology Symposium that you would have a focus on desistance from crime, and you would have not only researchers there, but policymakers there. I think wouldn't have happened 5-10 years ago. I just received an email from Larry Sherman this morning where he's talking about a police experiment that they're doing in the UK, calling it the Turning Point Project. And I think here in the States, with respect to the Second Chance Act, both President Obama and Eric Holder's, Attorney General Holder's, focus on giving offenders a second chance. I think there's an openness, there's an opening. And at Stockholm, we ended our lecture with basically the challenge is to see if criminal justice institutions can conceptualize and, in a sense, initiate turning points, be it through the police, probation, parole, corrections, what have you. So I'm actually encouraged by what I saw there.
The practice of criminal justice right now, I think, at least in the United States, is still heavily embedded in older models. And particularly when it comes to people coming out of prison, there tends to be an emphasis on prediction, like whether or not people will reform, and the notion that, well, if we have someone who's a good risk, then they let them go, or maybe they're not so many services. Those men and they're mostly men, they feel like they're high risk, they'll get services. But our research shows that prediction is fairly poor, so that gives me some pause. The other issue, though, is that, according to our work, desistance and turning points, it's not inevitable. So for a person to come out, there is the possibility of change. But I think our work suggests that current practices probably need to be modified to basically take into account the fact that at all moments, right, these turning points have to be supported, as does desistance. So in other words, it's not enough just to, help someone get a job or give them counseling for marriage. It has to be supported and maintained over time. And so I agree with John that there's a lot of promising things happening. I guess the question is, will they be implemented in a way that's consistent with the theory and with what we think it takes? Because we did end the conference by saying criminal justice institutions have a role to play in turning points, but they're not inevitable. So it's a two-way street.
Desistance is a process. I would also add that there are multiple pathways to desistance. I mean, because we were asked repeatedly in Stockholm, is it marriage the most important turning point? Well, no. We happen to have, I think, the best data on marriage. We have both qualitative and quantitative data, tells a consistent story. We've cut the data many different ways, the same results emerges. It's a robust finding. We believe it's causal, but I think the important message is that there are multiple pathways to desistance, and there's no one path that we must take. There's no magic bullet, there's no panacea. And I think a large piece of the next step would be to taking some of the findings and thinking really hard as to whether or not the conditions for change can be created within criminal justice processing of offenders. So what the UK experiment that Larry Sherman and Peter Nurburg are involved in is diverting offenders and not processing them through the system. I'm also really interested in whether or not conditions of probation or parole can be adjusted to facilitate turning points. One of Rob's students and one of my colleagues, David Kirk, just did a very interesting piece of research where he looked at Louisiana, and particularly men who were being released from the Louisiana Department of Corrections but had no home to go to because of Hurricane Katrina. And what he found was that the men who did not return home did better than those that did. And that raises all sorts of questions about geographic relocation. How do you cut off offenders from their previous delinquent peer groups, bad neighborhoods, and so forth? So I think it's a matter of really beginning to initiate a conversation, taking very serious the number of findings that emerge from our work.
I would just add two quick things to that, in the sense that I think the key is to take the conceptual points that we learned about in empirical findings in our work and try to apply them to the current criminal justice policy setting. So for example, turning point, I mean, that's an abstract concept, but we tried to drill down and put forth, well, what are the mechanisms behind turning points? What's really going on? Things like monitoring, support, enacting new routines. If you think about it, those sorts of things can be implemented in parole or probation, more consistent supervision, incentives to do well, support, let's say, for not just crime or drug treatment, but perhaps the man needs counseling, there's marital strife, or it's a conflictual family situation, child care, things like that. That may not seem, quote, criminal justice, but literacy, learning. These are the kind of things that really, I think, can be implemented with the current criminal justice system, and many of them are not. So we think that's an implication. The second point I would just like to make is that the concept of turning points is not set in stone in the sense of what we looked at. It's entirely conceivable to me and likely that there will be new turning points that we haven't even thought of, right? I mean, military service, marriage, but there are going to be other ones. Society's changing, or other ones may be more important as life course changes. Quick example, I mean, adolescence now is extended much more than it used to be. Kids are churning and taking more time off, age of marriage is later. That period between roughly 18 and into the 20s is different than it used to be. So those kind of turning points are being reshuffled. So we need to reconceptualize and anticipate new turning points.